If you want to create this beautiful high-end apartment in Blender, I'm going to be walking you through the exact step to do this. So let's jump into it. Alright, so in a new Blender, I'm literally just going to go A and delete. And this is not for absolute beginners, by the way. If you don't know how to use Blender yet, I suggest you check out the massive amount of free content on my YouTube channel for beginners. If you're not an absolute beginner, I hope you follow along. This is the floor plan here, which I will put on my free Discord. And that's what I'm working with. I just basically created this on a software called Revit. The wall setup is kind of going to be the first thing that I do. So I'm just going to be creating all these main walls, and then we'll be adding in the furniture and stuff like that. Also, these are my references in terms of the materials and the lighting. I wanted a really sophisticated kind of vibe, something very high-end, something very expensive, because why the heck not? So with that out of the way, let's get into the wall set out. All right, so I'm going to put that to the side on my other screen, and I'm going to go Control A, and I'm going to make a cube. Scale this to be 90 millimeters, 0.9 by 3 meters wide, and we're going to go 2.7 meters high. And I think there's some sort of conversion you can do for this, but these are in meters. Actually, that needs to be 0.09, so that's 90 millimeters. So I've just got this plan in as a reference image, and I'm going to start by laying out these walls, and I'm just going to quickly speed through it now, and I'll see you on the other side. Alright, so this is what it looks like when I add in the walls, and I think that's starting to look quite good. The next step that I want to make is to do all the bench tops and all the kind of built-in furniture. I'm going to start out by just making another cube. And by the way, if you're figuring out how to snap, you just go onto here and you click on vertex snapping. And that's literally that easy. So for the bench top, I'm going to do a 900 millimeter high bench. So if I snap to the bottom and then I come up, I'm going to go 0.9. And it's going to be 800 millimeters deep. So let's do the same, and we're going to go minus 0.8. And this is going to run along the entire length of this wall. Let's snap to there, snap to here. So let's do the same over here, 90 degrees. That's looking pretty good. And then I'm also going to just have a bit of joinery on this side as well. So I'm now going to create a floor. This is like just the slab, and then we're going to add a cool kind of timber flooring texture to it. Now I'm going to duplicate this floor. I'm going to snap this to the top. Now at this stage, I think it's really a good idea to pick your camera angle. Let's turn on the floor and the ceiling, and I'm going to just have a little scope around and just see what angles might look quite cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a few views. So if I go camera, and I'm going to go Control Alt number pad 0, and that's going to snap it to that view. So in the camera settings, I'm going to change this to 20 millimeters. I'm going to go into viewport display, and passepartout, I'm going to go on 1. You know what, I think this view here is actually a winner, because we're going to have the couch over there, the dining table. We're going to refine this a little bit more, but I think that's going to be perfect for what we want. And I've also just created a few more, but I think that this view is going to be the money shot. So for these kitchen kind of countertops, I'm going to duplicate, I'm going to snap to the bottom, and I'm going to move this up 0.7. And that's like the perfect kind of height above a bench top that your head can kind of go in, and you won't bump your head, so that's perfect. And this is going to be a pretty simple minimalistic kitchen. If I bring my references across real quick, it's relatively straightforward. There's no like tricky details. So with that kind of in mind, I'm going to get into modeling that, and I'm going to have those references off to the side. And actually, you know what, it might help to just isolate all this. What I'm really doing now is like the kind of base cabinets, and then we're going to be adding some doors on the top. So let's bring that up to the top. That's looking pretty good. So let's add the doors now. I'm going to go create another cube, and we're going to just bring this up to meet the bottom. Let's bring this right in. I'm going to array this all the way to the end and see what kind of fits. Let's bring this out with that array in, and then we can kind of like really fine tweak that. Now all of these, it's so easy. We can just bring this down, and then that's going to form our kind of base cabinetry. We need to bring it a little bit further up, so let's go 0.15, and then that's going to be our toe kick. And what I'm going to do now is grab all 3 of these, duplicate them up, and then we're also going to grab the top, bring it down, and I want this thickness here to be 0.03. And let's bring this right down. All right, so one thing that I actually need to do, I've just added those toe kicks at the bottom. I want to create some full height joinery here. That's looking pretty good. Yeah, that's good. Let's bring that across a little bit. I'm going to add those little timber joinery bits now. So by cutting in this kind of nook here on the geometry that gets arrayed, we can then extend this out, and it does it to all of these ones. And before we bring in the tap and the stovetop and stuff, I'm going to just add a nice trim at the top. You always want your appliances and everything to be in a bit of a triangle. So the sink, the stovetop, and the fridge, so that forms a bit of a triangle. So let's centralize this on this one here. Let's just go into this view. Let's just make sure that we're centering it on this joinery. Cool, that's looking nice.
Alright, so onto the UV mapping. I'm going to be turning off the ceiling and the floor to make it a little bit easier to work with this. So let's go ahead and do that. And then let's turn this off as well if we can. I'm just going to start my way from the left hand side. I'm going to be selecting everything, marking the seam, going back in, applying the transformation. For the texel density, it's going to be a 4K texture. So go up to texture size. And this is a free add-on, by the way. And then I'm going to go 20.48, and that's going to be the correct size for that texture. So for literally all of this, I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll see you pretty soon. Alright, so I'm just selecting everything that I want to be that nice timber walnut kind of material, which I think would be something similar to this. I'm using Polygon, but you can get free materials from Polyhaven. This just makes it easy, and the materials are amazing. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check that out. So if I go apply 4K, cool, okay. Alright, so that's a good start. And now I'm going to check to see that the rotation of each object is actually correct. So a lot of this is actually looking pretty good, but I can see down here, this one's not the correct orientation of the UV. So I'm just going to go into the UV editor, and I'm going to go in here, R90, and I'm just rotating that texture, the UV map 90 degrees. So I want this to be a nice consistent vertical texture. And let's just do the same for this one. And for these trims, they will be running the other direction, because you can't really get a piece of timber running that way that long. Like it's just, it would just be ridiculous. So let's just make sure that the UV map for that timber is actually running the right way, which it probably will, because it automatically runs in the longest direction in general. All right, so what we're going to do is actually apply a bit of a modification to this texture. And this is a little sneaky tip that I often do for my shaders where I want a bit of variation. It's a setup where you've got a UV randomization, which the geometry node actually uses the random per island, and that little node there plugs into your UV map, and it does some magic. I'm not going to walk you through how to produce this. Take a screenshot. The random per island goes into a color ramp, which actually brightens and darkens things as it goes. But then basically this add vector goes into all of the vectors of your color maps. So that's it there. Screenshot it, copy it. I'm not going to explain everything. What I'm going to do is actually copy all of this, and then for the sake of time, I'm going to paste it in here. I'm going to delete. Well, I'm basically just going to be adding in the textures as I go. You won't actually be able to see this in viewport display. This is only for cycles. Once we get into the lighting and stuff, you'll start to see that take effect. You know what? I actually think this travertine would be quite cool. So I'm going to give that a shot. This is getting me really excited. I love how this is starting to look. So I'm going to make a new material actually. We're going to make this quite dark. I'm just going to go select all of this, and let's add a glass material, and I'll just walk you through how I made this. So we've got a mix shader, which is mixing in a glass BSDF, a transparent BSDF, and then a maximum math node. with a shadow ray and reflection ray light path coming into that. And then that's the factor to mix the two shaders. And you could just use a simple glass BSDF. It's okay, but this just allows more light to actually pass through. And I think it has the most realistic kind of result. All right, so let's go ahead and grab a flooring material and chuck this on the floor. I'm going to be using the Floor Generator 2.0. This is a really awesome plugin, and I highly recommend checking it out on Superhive. There's an affiliate link in the description for this. I've used this so much. So basically what you do is you just click the floor, you add a modifier, Floor Generator, and Standard. And basically what this does is it automatically creates repetition and kind of differences between the floorboards and actual 3D geometry, which is pretty awesome. I'm going to go ahead and just drag one of these materials on, and just like that, we've got like a pretty damn realistic floor. And I can kind of change this. We've got a few different options here in terms of different floor colors and tones, just to see what kind of vibe I'm looking for. But let's just go ahead and put this one on maybe. It kind of completely depends on the vibe, but I think that one might be nice for now. I'm just going to go ahead and rotate this 90 degrees, and because I just want that to follow the line of the joinery there. So that's looking pretty nice. So we've got all the main materials on here, so I think we can start looking at the lighting now. And I've just added in my HDRI, which is a Joburg Central one from Polyhaven. This is what it looks like here. So you can download that for free. And this is how it looks when you add that in. The next thing you want to do is press Ctrl T on this shader, and then if nothing comes up, enable Node Wrangler. From that point onwards, we can actually rotate this sky to suit, you know, the window location. So I'm just going to go ahead and rotate around this HDRI to create a really cool mood. So I'm still rotating around, and I'm just trying to find that nice sweet spot of lighting, you know, from the sun, but also what we see out here. I think that's actually quite cool. Let's just tweak it a little bit more and see what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and add some furniture in from my 3D Shaker interior furnishings pack. You can actually get this on Superhive. There's a discount code. It's Oliver15. There's a kind of a thing in the description if you want to use that. You literally get 15% off this pack, which is awesome. And you support me as well. So that's also very helpful. So I'm going to go through here, and I'm going to just select a dining table to start with. So if I go down here, let's have a look at the table. I really want to pick something that's a little bit Japanese, a little bit Scandinavian. There's actually a word for that, which I've forgotten, but I think that's quite interesting. And if I go ahead and bring up this image texture, just to make sure I'm kind of in the right area, let's bring that through. Let's rotate this 90 degrees, and let's just make sure that we're placing this in the right place. So I've just added this one into the scene. It's a Thornet 520, and you can also adjust the materials. So I want something a little bit more minimal and kind of neutral. Let's just change this hue and saturation to, yeah, maybe a little bit more neutral. As always, we can adjust this later on. And so I'm just going to go into here and bring this in, duplicate, rotate. Cool, so I think that's looking pretty good. Now for the couch, I'm actually going to use Polygon. So there is one couch that I really like in Polygon, and it just perfectly suits well, I actually designed this for this couch. So let's go ahead and import all of these ones in. Let's just see if we can match what we're doing here. So we've got kind of this one on the end. I think that's actually looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and get out of the isolation mode. I'm going to turn off my background image, and let's just snap to the floor. So I do really like this one. What I'm actually going to do is kind of cheat a little bit and bring it down. So to make it extra cozy, I've just added in some of these
plaid kind of blankets into the couch. You can literally just drag and drop them in. So the next key step that we want to do to make this scene really pop is actually adding in some ceiling lights. Alright, so I think that's looking pretty cool. If I go out to the camera view, you can see it's looking pretty nice. So this is how the track light looks. I'm just adjusting the rotation here and basically just kind of making it look like it's pointing towards certain things. Alright, so I think that track lighting is looking pretty nice. I'm also going to add that into the kitchen. And another really cool feature that I want to add that I see in high-end homes a lot is recessed ceiling tracks. So there's going to be a bit of a gap in the ceiling. So now that I've got the lights in there, I can quite easily just turn them off if I feel like it's a little bit too overpowering. But I think the lights are actually really important to be in there in the first place. And already you can see that's like really, really moody. And I actually kind of prefer this, I'm not going to lie. Let's just get these curtains in real quick and see how that kind of transforms the vibe. So I've got this pretty cool curtain shader from Blender Marketplace. Alright, so this is looking really nice and moody. I'm going to go ahead and just boost the exposure up. Alright, so I've just played around with the lighting a little bit more, and now I'm going to refine the camera angle before adding in the final decorations just to kind of finish this scene off. So I think what also would look quite cool is like a nice picture on the back end there, something to kind of break that space up. So I'm just looking through the 3D Shaker furnishing pack. And let's add some sockets as well. I think that would be like really quite funny, because one of the biggest things that people say when something's not super realistic is, oh, where are all the cables and the sockets and everything? So you know what? Let's add some let's add some sockets on the left hand side. And I'm also just going to start adding some stuff on the table, and I'm going to add in these napkin and plate models from the Polygon library. And to be honest, I think it's probably okay to see the strip lighting, but it does help to kind of brighten that area up a little bit. So I've just added in this olive tree at the back here, which I think just adds some nice micro details into the scene. So let's go ahead and render this out. I'm going to not enable denoising for the actual proper render. I'm going to do 2000 samples, and let's go down into our passes and let's enable denoising data. And in the compositor, we're actually going to denoise it. So let's just make sure we've got everything right. Min samples 2000, and I'm also going to do a 4K texture. So let's go 200%. And I think this is looking pretty good. So I'll see you on the other side very shortly. Alright, so I've just finished rendering. It's been about an hour to render a 4K 2000 sample render with 12 bounces in everything, which is quite a long time, but I think it's worth it. So what we're going to do is quickly go into compositing. We're going to enable nodes, and I'm going to create a filter denoise, and we're going to put our denoising albedo, denoising normal, and then just image into the image and then back out. So the output from the denoise node goes into the composite. Cool, so I'm going to go up here and I'm going to save this as a 16-bit TIFF. I'm going to call this apartment. So for this, I'm going to be using Photoshop, but honestly, you can use GIMP or Darktable or whatever you prefer as your post-processing software. And I'm going to start out by editing the values of this image. Something also that's really useful is actually bringing up your reference material so you can kind of see the values that we want to achieve. Something I like to do here is boost the vibrance and reduce the saturation. Makes the colors nice and punchy but not too saturated. So if I go over to my curve, you can also kind of bring those highlights down a little bit, bring the blacks up, and then we can kind of just create a bit of a S curve, which creates some nice contrast there. Onto the detail, I like to just really go ham on the sharpening, and then on the color mixer, this is actually where the magic happens. I can see this weird red highlights there. I really want to tone that down a little bit if I can. So let's just bring the red saturation down. And if I actually bring my other reference material across, so that saturation, let's just bring that way down. And just as a final touch, I'm going to go rasterize and duplicate the layer, and then I'm going to convert it to a smart object, and let's go add on a high pass filter at 2, and then let's go down to overlay and just turn that on and off, and it just kind of really like provides that extra bit of detail, especially if you're posting this at on Instagram or something like that. So that's where I'm going to leave it. I'm really stoked with how this has come out, and I hope you're inspired by this. And if you are, make sure to jump on my free Discord. There's a link in the description, and you can share your work with the community and get feedback. And it's just a great place to learn and grow as a 3D artist. And you can also find links for all the assets and everything that I used in this series. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you very shortly in the next one. Cheers.